Welcome to the Israel Answers series, connecting Israel, the Bible, and you. Join Susan Michael as she explores timely issues and current events from a scriptural perspective to equip the Christian world with a balanced and biblical response. Be sure to subscribe for future episodes, which will ignite your faith and bring the Bible to life in your everyday world. Now, let's join Susan with your Israel Answers.
Well, hey there, and welcome to the Out of Zion podcast and to our Israel Answers teaching series. We have been walking through the Bible the last year. We've dealt with a lot of biblical subjects, and what I want to do now for the next few weeks is to connect the Bible to Israel today. So we're going to fill in a few gaps, bring us up to speed with modern Israel, and then we're going to begin to talk about some things regarding Israel, regarding Christian support of Israel, regarding anti-Semitism, and all kinds of related issues. So I'm really looking forward to our time together. So we left our Bible in the New Testament. We were talking about the early church, its Jewish roots, and we talked about how Jesus was Jewish and he interacted in everyday life in his ministry with the Jewish people of the day. And a lot of the debates and the back and forth were very common and a very acceptable way of discussing and arguing matters regarding the law of Moses. So there were four main sects at the time of Jesus that we read about. Three of them in the New Testament, but there's the fourth sect is there. It's just not named. But the first sect, of course, are the Pharisees. And because Jesus spoke against hypocrisy of some of the Pharisees, we kind of tend to have a negative view of Pharisees, but actually we shouldn't. The Pharisees were the rabbis. They were the teachers of the law. They taught the people how to be observant of the law of Moses, and they had different interpretations amongst them. They had different schools of thought amongst them in terms of how to interpret the Mosaic law, how to abide by it in those days. And so those were the Pharisees. The fact that Jesus may have argued, or I should say disagreed with some of them, he actually agreed with them a lot. And so we need to take that in its proper context. The second sect that we read about in the New Testament are the Sadducees. They were the priestly class. They were the aristocrats made up of the priest, the high priest, and the leading priestly families of the day. And they were the Sadducees. They disagreed with the Pharisees on the matters of the oral interpretation of the law, but they certainly believed in the law of Moses and following it strictly, and especially in the temple sacrificial system, which they were in charge of. Then there was a third group that we can see their activity in the New Testament, but I don't think they're ever actually named, and that's the Essenes. The Essenes were actually a reactionary group to the Sadducees. They felt that the priests were politically corrupt, that the services in the temple, the sacrificial system, therefore, was not being done in a pure manner because the priests weren't pure, and they would have nothing to do with the temple or the priesthood. They really emphasized purity and holiness in your daily lives. They were throughout the land of Israel, the Essenes. And then the fourth movement are the Zealots. And the Zealots were ones that were very zealous for the law and zealous that the Jewish people would be sovereign over their own land and able to obey the laws of God. And they couldn't wait to overthrow the rule of Rome. And they were just looking for the right opportunity and the right moment to overthrow Rome. And so these were the four main sects of Judaism during the time of Jesus. Something happened, though, that completely changed this mosaic of Judaism, and that was in 70 AD, after a 3-year siege of Jerusalem, when the Roman forces destroyed Jerusalem, destroyed the temple, and brought to an end the sacrificial system there at the temple. And this caused several changes. One is the Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai moved the Sanhedrin out of Jerusalem up to a town in the Galilee called Yavne. And there was another group of rabbis over in Babylon, and these two became the main two schools of thought within the rabbinic world. And they, in a way, had to adjust to Judaism without a temple, a Judaism without being present in the land, sovereignty in the land. And therefore, they became the way that Judaism carried on. So there were no longer any Sadducees, because there was no longer a temple or a priesthood. Therefore, there were no longer any Essenes who were reacting against the Sadducees. And there were no more Zealots, because the Zealots had lost. Rome had won. And the only sect that remained then was the Rabbinic tradition of Judaism. And they carried on, and they began a whole project of not only adjusting to a world where they didn't have a temple, but writing down all of the oral traditions and the rabbinic traditions and the rabbinic commentary on the law of Moses. This means that within Judaism, they were developing their own books beyond the Bible. And you could say that at this point, Judaism is having to make a major adjustment. In a way, it's been severed from the land. It's been severed from the temple. And over the years, Rabbinic Judaism became Judaism, and that's the type of Judaism we have today, is what is known as Rabbinic Judaism. And there are different streams within, of course, the Jewish world. And so here in the United States, we know the main three branches are Orthodox, Conservative, and Reform. And of course, within the Orthodox, there is several different movements. One, the ultra-Orthodox, or what we call the Haredi, and then there's a modern Orthodox. And then, of course, there is a traditional Orthodox. So there's a lot of different branches, but these are your three main ones: Orthodox, Conservative, and Reform. In Israel, they go by slightly different divisions. And in Israel, the chief rabbi and the rabbinic courts in Israel are all of the Orthodox or ultra-Orthodox persuasion. And so there is a little bit of a tangle going on between the conservative and the reform movements here in America with the Orthodox in Israel, because the Orthodox do not recognize them in Israel, and they are trying to get more to be accepted there in Israel. But in Israel, we go by 4 different categories. There is the Haredi, which are the ultra-Orthodox. There is the Dati, which the translation of Dati means religious. We would call it the Orthodox. And then there is the Masorti, which that is what we would call the more traditional. They're a little less religious than the Orthodox. And then there is the Haloni, which is translated as secular. And what I want to, just the one point that I want you to remember here is that as Judaism developed and we have these different categories, The main defining differences in the categories is based on how you observe the Mosaic law, how much of it you observe. And Judaism is not about a creed. It's not about believing a certain creed that you then accept as your creed and now you're Jewish. Judaism is about observing the law of Moses given to the people of Israel in a covenant. And so when we say that most of the Jews in Israel are secular, it doesn't mean that they're atheist or agnostic. There are some that are atheists or agnostic. It doesn't mean that they don't believe in a God. It means that they're not keeping kosher, they're not keeping Sabbath, they're not being observant. And the more observant you are, the more you move up the ranks from Masorti to Dati to Haredi. The Haredi movement, which is the ultra-Orthodox movement, really is only a couple of hundred years old, and it started in Europe, and it was a little bit of a reactionary movement against the Enlightenment and against the assimilation of the Jewish people. And so they sort of taught to separate yourselves from society and to be very strict in the observance. And you can tell within the Haredi community which rabbi that they're following thebecause they dress a certain way based on the school that they're following. And these rabbis go back 200 years ago, and that's why some of their dress looks like they may become from Poland or Lithuania or Germany back 150, 200 years ago. And that's why the rabbi that they're following, his teaching and his doctrine is from that period. And so they're dressing according to that. Of course, Christianity is different because Christianity believes in a creed. And we're a religion that's based on a faith. It is based on what you believe and not a legal observance. The law of Moses, there are 613 commandments. And just a little aside for you is that some of the commandments are negative, meaning they were told not to do certain things. And some of those commandments are positive, meaning they were commanded to do certain things. So there's both in there. And some of the commandments are all about the temple service and the sacrificial service. And those commandments cannot be kept today because there is no temple. And then there were some commandments that required you to be in the land of Israel. And so, of course, those commandments can now be obeyed today because the Jewish people are back in the land. But they still have no temple, so they are still not able to be totally observant. So this is just to give you kind of an idea of the progression and the development of Judaism since the days of the Bible. And I'm just going to end our conversation today with this little thought. Today, if you Google who is a Jew, you're going to find there's a huge debate about this. How do you define Judaism today? Who is a Jew? And we tend to think Judaism is a religion, but it's actually more than that. It is a peoplehood. And sometimes I hear people use the word race, that they are a race, but they're not a race. There's many different races within the Jewish world. Just go to Israel and you'll see them. Black Jews from Ethiopia, Asian Jews from India and China, and Middle Eastern Jews with an olive complexion, and Ashkenazi Jews with a fair complexion out of Europe and Russia. So it's not a race. And there are Jews that do abide by the Jewish religion, but then there are Jews that don't believe in the Jewish religion, even could be atheistic, yet they're considered a Jew. So how do you define it? And this is the great debate. It is a communal identity as a people. It is a people, an ethnicity that comes with a set of values. and kind of a DNA of how they approach life and see the world. And there is a religion for those that want to follow it. And most would be loyal to that religion, but they may not observe it as religiously as others would. So just an interesting little aside there of who is a Jew. And to be Jewish has a cultural expression, an ethnic expression, religious expression, political, genealogical. It's based on were you born to a Jewish woman or were you born to a Jewish father? Different sects look at it different ways. And then there's a personal dimension. You can be born a non-Jew and yet convert to Judaism and become a part of the Jewish people. So interesting, isn't it? It's fascinating. There's nothing quite like it with any other religion. But one of the fascinating facets of being a Jew and of understanding Judaism today. So that's it for today. We've kind of brought you up to speed from the time of the Bible to today on the Jewish faith. Next week, we're going to talk about Christianity. So I'll see you back here next week. And until then, God bless. And I want to offer you a free download. We have a download, 10 Reasons to Stand with Israel. And actually, it's 10 reasons why Christians should stand with Israel. Get your free download by going to the link in today's show note, or go to www.outofzionshow.com and click on the tab for resources. We'll have it there as well. But be sure, download this free resource for you. We're going to be talking about some of the points in it in the coming week. So we want to make sure that you have it. You can print it out. You can share it with friends and family. Invite them to join us here on the Out of Zion show for our Israel Answers series. So we'll see you back here next week. And until then, God bless.
We hope you have enjoyed this episode of Out of Zion with Susan Michael. Be sure to subscribe to Out of Zion now on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, Pray.com, Salem One Place, Salem Life Audio. Out of Zion with Susan Michael is a production of ICEJ USA. All rights reserved.